Get up and get out right now before I call security to drag you out. How could someone like you possibly sit in this airplane cabin?
You don't belong in first class. The words were not shouted. That made them worse. They slipped through the quiet cabin of Avery Air Flight 417 like a blade pulled from a sleeve. Sharp, clean, meant to cut without leaving fingerprints. For one long second, nobody moved. A coffee cup hovered halfway to a woman's lips. A newspaper lowered in row 3. The soft chime from the boarding scanner faded behind the cabin door, and even the low hiss of the air vent seemed to shrink into the walls. Ethan Brooks sat in seat 2A, one hand resting on the armrest, the other still holding his phone. He looked up slowly. The flight attendant standing over him wore a navy uniform zip-on pressed so tightly it seemed to hold her posture together. Her name tag read Madison Clark. Her smile was professional, but her eyes were not. They were fixed on Ethan's plain gray hoodie, his dark jeans, his scuffed black sneakers, and the worn leather briefcase tucked neatly under the seat in front of him. She had already decided what she was looking at. A mistake, a problem, a man in the wrong place. "Excuse me?" Ethan asked. His voice was calm, too calm for the way the cabin had turned cold around him. Madison tilted her head, the way people do when they want to sound polite while being cruel. "Sir, this section is for first-class passengers. I'm going to need you to check your boarding pass and move to your assigned cabin." Ethan blinked once. He did not look embarrassed. He did not scramble for an apology. He did not lower his eyes. That bothered her more than anything. "I am in my assigned seat," he said. 2A. Madison gave a small breath through her nose. Not quite a laugh, not quite a sigh. Something in between. Behind her, a few passengers exchanged looks. A man in a tan sports coat leaned slightly into the aisle. A woman with silver hair adjusted her glasses. Someone 2 rows back lifted a phone just high enough to record without being obvious. Ethan saw it all. He always saw more than people thought. Madison held out her hand. Boarding pass. Not please, not may I see it, just the order. Ethan reached into the inside pocket of his hoodie and handed her the paper ticket. He also held out his driver's license. Madison took the pass between 2 fingers, as if it might leave dust on her skin. She looked at it for half a second. Then her jaw tightened. The pass clearly read first class. Seat 2A, Ethan Brooks. Paid, confirmed. But facts have never stopped a person determined to protect a prejudice. Madison looked back at him. There may be an issue in the system. Ethan's eyes stayed on hers. "What issue?" She glanced over her shoulder toward the front galley, where another flight attendant had stopped pretending not to watch. Tyler Reed was younger, maybe late 20s, fresh haircut, polished smile. The kind of man who enjoyed being close to authority because it made him feel taller. He walked over slowly, his arms folded. "What's going on?" he asked, though his smirk said he already knew. Madison held the boarding pass out toward him. "This gentleman believes he's seated in 2A. Tyler glanced at Ethan, then at the hoodie, then at the worn briefcase. "Yeah," he said softly. "That doesn't look right." A few passengers heard him. One man chuckled under his breath. Ethan did not. Tyler leaned a little closer, lowering his voice just enough to pretend he was being discreet. "Sir, sometimes people get confused during boarding. Economy is behind the curtain. We can help you find your seat before this gets uncomfortable." There it was, before this gets uncomfortable. As if Ethan were the one creating the discomfort. As if his presence was the disruption. As if a man sitting quietly in a seat he paid for had somehow become a threat to the peace of people who could not imagine him belonging there. Ethan inhaled through his nose. Slow, measured. He had learned that kind of breathing young, in conference rooms where investors spoke over him until they learned he owned the company. In restaurants where hosts asked if he was waiting for a delivery entrance. In luxury stores where security drifted behind him like a shadow. You survive enough insults, you learn which ones are accidents. This was not an accident. "My seat is 2A, Ethan said again. "I paid for it. I checked in this morning." The gate agent scanned my pass. It turned green. Madison's face flickered. Just a flicker. Tyler noticed it too, and his smirk thinned. From the aisle behind them came a sharper voice. "Is there a problem here?" Ethan turned his head. A white man in his late 50s stood at the front of first class, holding a carry-on and wearing the impatience of someone used to having doors open before he touched them. Beside him stood a woman in cream-colored cashmere, her mouth pressed into a line of quiet annoyance. Charles and Eleanor Whitman. Ethan did not know their names yet, but he knew the type. Charles looked at the seat number, then at Ethan. His eyebrows rose. "That's our seat," he said. Madison stepped back quickly, as if relieved to have a more acceptable passenger arrive. "Mr. Whitman, we're handling it." Charles gave Ethan a tight smile. Not friendly, not human, administrative. "Listen, pal," he said. "There's clearly been a mix-up. My wife and I fly this route every month. We always sit up front." Eleanor touched his arm, but her eyes never left Ethan. "Charles," she murmured, "let the crew deal with him, not the situation, not the mistake, him." The word sat heavy in the air. Ethan looked from Charles to Madison to Tyler. And in that moment, something behind his eyes changed. Not anger, not fear, recognition. This was no longer about a seat. It was about the invisible line some people still drew across American life. A line that said comfort belonged to some, suspicion belonged to others. A line that could follow a man from a sidewalk to a boardroom, from a hotel lobby to a first-class cabin 30,000 feet above the ground. Madison straightened. "Sir," she said, her voice now louder, meant for the cabin to hear, "I'm going to ask you one more time to gather your belongings and move to the correct section." Ethan's fingers rested still on the armrest. A baby cried somewhere in coach. A suitcase wheel squeaked near the boarding door. The phones kept rising. Ethan did not move. He simply looked at Madison and said no. The word was quiet, but it stopped everything. Tyler's mouth opened. Madison's face flushed. Charles gave a dry laugh. Eleanor shook her head as if she had just witnessed something indecent. Madison leaned closer. "Then I'll have to call security." Ethan nodded once. "Call whoever you need to call." His tone was not defiant. It was settled, and that unsettled them. Because powerless people plead. Guilty people explain too much. Frightened people shrink. But Ethan Brooks did none of those things. He sat there like a man who had already seen the ending. Madison stepped toward the galley, speaking quickly into her radio. Tyler stayed beside Ethan, watching him with narrowed eyes. "You're making a mistake," Tyler muttered. Ethan looked up at him. "No," he said, "you are." Tyler gave a short laugh, but it came out weak. Across the aisle, the woman with silver hair finally lowered her phone and whispered to her husband, "That man hasn't raised his voice once." Her husband did not answer. He was watching Ethan now too, really watching. And for the first time, doubt entered the cabin. Not enough to stop the humiliation, not yet, but enough to change the air. At the front of the plane, Madison's voice cracked through the intercom to the gate. "We need security in first class." Ethan reached into his pocket and unlocked his phone. No panic, no shaking hands. Just one message sent to one contact. Grace Bennett, 2 words, "Begin documentation." Then he placed the phone face down on the armrest and looked out the window. Outside, the jet bridge trembled slightly in the wind. Inside, every eye waited for him to break. But Ethan Brooks did not break. Not for Madison's, not for Tyler, not for the Whitmans. And not for a cabin full of strangers who were about to learn that the man they had judged by a hoodie was the one person on that aircraft with the power to change the entire company. Security arrived in pairs. That was the first thing Ethan noticed. Not one officer walking in with patience and questions, but 2 of them stepping through the aircraft door with the practiced urgency of people who had already been told who the problem was. Their boots made dull sounds against the jet bridge floor. Thud, thud, thud. Every sound seemed louder now. The cabin had stopped pretending. Newspapers were down. Laptops were half closed. Phones were up. Even passengers who had spent their lives looking away from uncomfortable things were watching because discomfort had finally walked too close to their own seats. Madison stood near the front galley with her arms folded across her chest. She had regained some of her confidence. Authority had arrived. Reinforcement. Protection. The kind of backup that made people mistake being supported for being right. Tyler stood beside her, chin lifted, trying to look calm, but his eyes kept flicking toward the passengers recording from row 3 and row 4. He knew the cameras changed things. They always did. The lead security officer was a woman in her early 40s with dark hair pulled tight into a bun. Her badge read Rebecca Hayes. She had the tired eyes of someone who had handled too many airport arguments before breakfast. Beside her was a younger officer, broad-shouldered and silent, one hand resting near his belt. Rebecca looked at Madison first, not Ethan. That mattered. "What's the issue?" she asked. Madison took one step forward. "This passenger is refusing to leave first class. He has become difficult, and we need him moved before departure." Ethan's eyes lifted slowly. Difficult. The word always arrived when obedience did not. Rebecca turned toward him then. Her face remained neutral, but her gaze moved fast. Hoodie, jeans, sneakers, briefcase, calm posture. No raised voice, no clenched fists. Nothing about him matched the alarm in Madison's tone. Still, the story had already been framed before she stepped on board. "Sir," Rebecca said, "I'm Officer Hayes. I need you to come with us so we can resolve this at the gate." Ethan did not stand. "My seat is 2A, he said. "I have a valid boarding pass. I showed it twice." Madison cut in quickly. "There is a system issue." Rebecca looked over. "What kind of system issue?" Madison hesitated, just enough. Tyler stepped in before the pause could become dangerous. "The seat was intended for a premium passenger. Mr. Whitman flies with us all the time. This gentleman's ticket appears questionable." Charles Whitman cleared his throat from the aisle like he had been waiting for his moment. "I don't want to make trouble," he said, though everything about his posture suggested the opposite. "But my wife and I have an important connection in Los Angeles. We were assured our usual seats would be available." His voice was smooth, educated, familiar with being believed. Eleanor stood behind him, one hand pressed to her pearl necklace. "This has been very upsetting," she added softly. Madison glanced at them with sympathy. Then she looked at Ethan with impatience. Rebecca noticed. So did Ethan. The officer took a slow breath. "Sir, may I see your boarding pass?" Ethan handed it over. No argument, no drama. Rebecca examined it. She checked the name. Seat 2A, first class, Avery Air Flight 417. Departure from Chicago to Los Angeles. Then she looked at Ethan's license. The names matched. Her mouth tightened slightly. "This appears valid," she said. The words landed hard. Madison's face changed. Not much, but enough. Tyler shifted his weight. Charles frowned as if reality had become inconvenient. Madison reached for the boarding pass. "Officer, with respect, we've seen altered passes before. People screenshot things. They edit them. They find ways." The woman with silver hair in row 3 spoke before she could stop herself. She barely looked at it the first time. Everyone turned. The woman flushed, but she did not look away. Her husband touched her sleeve, a small warning. She ignored it. "I saw him hand it to her," she said. "He was polite." She decided he was wrong before she checked. Madison's mouth opened. "Mom, this does not concern you." "It concerns everyone sitting here," the woman replied. Her voice trembled, but it held, "because we're watching it happen." For the first time, the cabin breathed differently, not freer, but awake. Ethan looked at the woman and gave a small nod, not a smile, not gratitude exactly, more like recognition. One person choosing truth in public can shift the weight of a room. Rebecca handed the boarding pass back to Ethan. "Mr. Brooks," she said carefully, "I understand you believe you're in the correct seat." "I don't believe it," Ethan said. "I know it." Madison folded her arms tighter. "There are other options. We offered to reseat him." "No," Ethan said, his voice even. "You ordered me out." Tyler rolled his eyes. "Come on, man. You're making this bigger than it needs to be." Ethan turned his head toward him. "It became bigger when you looked at me and decided I was less believable than a passenger who wanted my seat." The words were calm. That made them impossible to dismiss. Tyler's face reddened. Charles gave a short laugh. "This is absurd. Are we really going to turn a seating mistake into a social issue?" Ethan looked at him then. My cabin went still again. "It becomes a social issue," Ethan said, "when a mistake only happens to certain people." No one spoke. Even Madison had no quick answer. A phone camera from the back zoomed in. Somewhere near row 5, a young man whispered, "He's right." Someone else whispered, "This is going online." Madison heard that. Her eyes sharpened. "Recording crew members without consent may violate airline policy," she snapped. The young man lowered his phone halfway, then raised it again. "We're in public view," he said, "and I'm recording my own flight experience." Rebecca turned slightly toward Madison. "Let's keep this calm." "I am calm," Madison said too quickly. But she was not. Her breathing had changed. Shorter, higher. She could feel control slipping, and control was the thing she valued most. In her mind, she was not cruel. People like Madison, rarely think of themselves that way. She thought she had standards. She thought she protected order. She thought first class was a place with a certain look, a certain tone, a certain kind of person. And Ethan Brooks had walked into that private picture and refused to disappear. The younger officer leaned toward Rebecca. "Gate supervisor is on the way," he murmured. Madison seized on it. "Good. Maybe they can confirm what we already know." Ethan heard her. He had heard every word, but his face stayed still. Inside, though, something old moved through him. A memory of his father at a car dealership in Detroit, dressed in work pants after a 12-hour shift, being ignored until a white customer walked in. A memory of his mother telling him, "Don't let bitterness make a home in you, baby, but don't let disrespect pass as peace either." That lesson had taken him years to understand. Peace without dignity was just surrender with softer lighting. He glanced at his phone. No new message from Grace yet, but she would be moving fast. Grace Bennett had been with him for 6 years. She knew which calls to make, which documents to send, which board members would answer immediately. She also knew why Ethan had chosen to fly quietly today, not for comfort, for truth. Avery Air had received complaints for months, not the kind that made national news, small ones, easy to bury. A black physician asked for extra identification after boarding. A Latino veteran moved from an exit row without explanation. A young mother ignored while other passengers were served. Patterns. Companies hate that word. A single incident can be explained away. A pattern cannot. Ethan had wanted to see if the reports were exaggerated. Now he had his answer. A man in a dark suit stepped onto the plane, breathing hard from the jet bridge. His name tag read Mark Ellison, Gate Operations Manager. He looked around the cabin, saw the phone, saw the officer, saw Madison's tight face, and understood this was no ordinary delay. "What's going on?" he asked. Madison moved toward him quickly. "Mark, thank God. We have a passenger refusing to move from a seat assigned to Mr. Whitman." Mark looked at Ethan, then at Charles, then at the boarding pass in Ethan's hand. "Mr. Brooks," Mark said, "could I see that?" Ethan handed it over again. Mark scanned it with his handheld device. The machine beeped green. A small sound, a devastating sound. Rebecca saw it. The woman with silver hair saw it. Tyler saw it too, and his throat moved as he swallowed. Mark stared down at the screen. Confirmed. Seat 2A. No irregularity, no duplicate, no override. He looked back at Madison. "This seat belongs to Mr. Brooks." For 1 second, Truth stood in the aisle with nowhere to hide. Madison's face went pale, then hard. "That can't be right," she said. Mark lowered his voice. "It is right." Charles stepped forward. "Now hold on. I was told this would be handled." Mark looked uncomfortable. "Mr. Whitman, your assigned seat is 2C. Charles's eyes narrowed. "I know people in your executive office." Ethan finally looked up from his seat. "So do I." His voice was quiet, but something in it made Mark turn fully toward him. Ethan's phone buzzed. Once. He picked it up. A message from Grace. "Board notified. Legal listening. Operations awaiting your call." Ethan read it, then placed the phone back down. Madison saw the movement, saw Mark's sudden uncertainty, saw Rebecca studying Ethan with a new kind of attention. For the first time, fear touched her face. Not guilt, not yet. Fear. Because somewhere beneath all her assumptions, she was beginning to understand a terrible possibility. The man in the hoodie was not powerless. He had never been powerless. Ethan leaned back in seat 2A, his expression calm enough to frighten every person who had mistaken silence for weakness. Then he said, "Before anyone else threatens to remove me, I think it's time we call Avery Air Operations." The name Avery Air Operations changed the temperature of the cabin. No one moved at first. Mark Ellison stood in the aisle, with Ethan's boarding pass in one hand and his scanner in the other. The green confirmation still glowed on the small screen. It was a simple piece of technology, a beep, a name, a seat. But in that moment, it felt louder than every voice that had tried to erase him. Madison stared at Mark. "Why would we call operations?" she asked. Her voice had lost its edge. Not completely. People like Madison did not surrender that fast. But something inside it had cracked. Ethan looked at her, then at Tyler, then at Charles Whitman standing stiff near the front of the cabin. "Because this is no longer a seating issue," Ethan said. "It is a service failure. It is a policy failure. And it is being witnessed by an entire cabin." A murmur moved through first class. Not loud, not chaotic, just enough to show that people understood. Charles gave a bitter laugh and turned toward Mark. This is ridiculous. Are you letting him run the flight now? Mark did not answer right away. That was his mistake. Silence gave Charles space to grow bigger. I'm serious, Charles continued. My company spends a great deal of money with this airline. I've been a premium member for almost 20 years. My wife and I should not have to stand here while some passenger makes a scene. Eleanor touched his sleeve. Charles, please? But her eyes were not soft. They were embarrassed, not by what had happened to Ethan, but by the fact that it had not gone quietly. Ethan noticed that too. There are people who dislike injustice, and there are people who only dislike witnesses. Rebecca Hayes stepped slightly between Charles and Ethan. Mr. Whitman, please return to your assigned seat while we sort this out. Charles looked at her badge. Officer, with respect, I am not the problem here. The woman with silver hair in row 3 spoke again. Yes, you are, her husband whispered Margaret, but Margaret did not stop. She had lived long enough to know the cost of silence. She had seen neighbors turned away from clubs. Coworkers passed over. Students talked down to. She had watched decent people choose comfort over courage and call it being polite. Now her hands shook, but her voice did not. He was sitting quietly, she said. You came in and treated him like he had taken something from you. Charles's face hardened. I don't need a lecture from you. No, Margaret said. Maybe you do. The cabin froze. Tyler looked toward Madison, waiting for her to regain command. But Madison was watching Ethan's phone. It sat face down on the armrest like a sealed verdict. Mark cleared his throat. Mr. Brooks, I can step into the jet bridge and call operations. No, Ethan said. Mark blinked. Ethan picked up his phone. We can call him from here. The words were simple, practical, reasonable. That made them worse for Madison. Because there was no way to call it disruptive, no way to frame it as aggression, no anger to point at, no shouting, no threat. Just a man asking for the truth in front of witnesses. Ethan tapped a contact. Grace answered before the first ring finished. Yes, sir. Madison's eyes widened slightly. Sir, not buddy, not passenger. Not problem, sir. Ethan put the phone on speaker and rested it on the tray table. Grace, I'm on Avery Air, Flight 417, Seat 2A. We have a crew escalation involving my confirmed seat. I want operations on the line, legal documented, and the customer integrity file open now. Mark's face changed at the phrase, customer integrity file. That was not language ordinary passengers used. Rebecca noticed. So did Tyler. Grace's voice came through clear and steady. Already done. Chief Operations Officer is joining. General Counsel is listening. Board Chair has been notified. The cabin went silent in a new way. Not curious now, afraid. Mark's scanner lowered slowly to his side. Madison swallowed. Tyler looked from Ethan to the phone, then back again. Charles frowned. Who is this man? He muttered. Ethan heard him, but did not answer. Not yet. A new voice entered the call. Male, older, controlled but strained. Mr. Brooks, this is Martin Hale from Operations. We have the flight file open. The color left Mark's face. Madison took a step back. Martin Hale was not a customer service supervisor. He was not a call center manager. He was Avery Air's chief operating officer. Every employee in that cabin had seen his name in commi announcements. Some had watched his training videos. Madison had once joked that he sounded like a funeral director reading safety policies. Now he was speaking directly to the man she had tried to remove. Ethan's voice stayed level. Martin, confirm the seat assignment for the cabin. There was the sound of typing. Then Martin answered. Passenger Ethan Brooks, first class, seat 2A, ticket purchased directly through Avery Air, fully paid. No irregularities, no duplicate assignment, no authorization to move him. Every sentence struck Madison like a door closing. No irregularities, no duplicate, no authorization. Ethan looked at Mark. Please confirm what your scanner showed. Mark's mouth opened, then closed. He glanced at Madison, then at Rebecca, then at the phone's recording. His shoulders dropped. My scanner confirmed the same, he said quietly. Seat 2A belongs to Mr. Brooks. Madison's lips parted. Mark, we thought Ethan cut in. What did you think? The question was soft. That made it brutal. Madison looked at him. For the first time, she truly looked, not at the hoodie, not at the sneakers, not at the briefcase, at him. A man with steady eyes. A man who had given her every chance to do the smallest decent thing. Check the pass. Read the name. Treat him like a customer. Treat him like a person. She had failed before the conflict even began. I thought there was confusion, she said. No, Ethan replied. You created confusion after the facts did not match your assumption. Tyler shifted. Look, this is getting blown out of proportion. Rebecca turned sharply toward him. Stop talking. The command snapped through the cabin. Tyler stopped. Even Charles looked startled. Grace's voice returned on the phone. Sir, General Counsel requests that no employee alter any digital record or delete any internal communication related to this incident. Mark's eyes moved instantly to Madison. Madison went still. It was too fast, too visible. Ethan caught it. So did Rebecca. What record would need to be preserved? Ethan asked. Madison said nothing. Tyler stared at the floor. Mark's breathing changed. Mr. Brooks, Mark said slowly, I need to check the cabin tablet. Madison reached for it before he could. I have it. Mark held out his hand. Madison, her fingers tightened around the device. For one thin second, the whole story balanced there. Not in a speech, not in a lawsuit, in a hand refusing to release a tablet. Then Rebecca stepped closer. Mom, hand it to him. Madison's face flushed red. She gave Mark the tablet. He opened the seating log. His thumb moved. He stopped, his eyes lifted. What is it? Rebecca asked. Mark's voice came out low. Someone attempted to manually flag seat 2A for reassignment 8 minutes ago. Ethan did not move, but the cabin did. A gasp from row 3. A sharp whisper from row 4. Charles took half a step backward. Eleanor covered her mouth. Tyler looked as if the floor had dropped beneath him. Madison whispered, I was trying to fix the issue. Ethan's eyes stayed on her. No, he said, you were trying to make your assumption look like policy. The sentence hit harder than shouting, because it was true and everyone knew it. Martin Hale spoke again through the phone, his voice colder now. Mr. Ellison, secure that device. Officer Hayes, if you are willing, please remain present as a witness. Mr. Brooks, we can have a replacement crew assigned and remove the involved personnel pending review. The words spread across the cabin like winter. Replacement crew. Remove involved personnel. Pending review. Madison's face collapsed, not fully. Pride held part of it up, but her eyes betrayed her. She was no longer seeing a man she could push around. She was seeing consequences. Ethan leaned back. The reveal was almost complete now, but not spoken out loud. The people closest to power had already recognized its shape. Mark turned toward him carefully. Mr. Brooks, he said, and his voice had changed entirely. Would you like me to inform the crew? Ethan looked at Madison, then Tyler, then the Whitmans, then the passengers with their phones raised. He thought about how many people never get this moment, how many are humiliated, removed, blamed, and forgotten before anyone important learns their name. How many swallow the insult because they have jobs to keep, children to feed, connections to make, appointments they cannot miss. That thought slowed his breathing. It did not soften the truth. It sharpened it. Yes, Ethan said. Inform them. Mark faced the cabin. His voice shook once, then steadied. For everyone present, Mr. Ethan Brooks is not only a confirmed first-class passenger, he is the chief executive officer and controlling owner of Avery Air. The cabin went dead silent. Madison stared at Ethan as if the seat itself had turned into a witness against her. Tyler took a step back. Charles Whitman looked suddenly smaller. And Ethan Brooks, the man they had judged by his clothes, remained seated in 2A, calm, still, unmoved. The most powerful person on the aircraft had been there the whole time. Madison Clark looked like a person watching her own reflection break. For a few seconds, she did not speak. No one did. The words controlling owner of Avery Air seemed to hang above the first-class cabin, heavy and undeniable. They touched every seat, every phone, every face that had watched Ethan Brooks get questioned, doubted, and threatened while he sat exactly where he belonged. Tyler Reed's polished confidence drained from him first. He stepped back toward the galley, one hand brushing against the counter as if he needed something solid to hold him up. Mr. Brooks, he said, his voice suddenly thin. I didn't know. Ethan turned his head slowly. That was the problem, he said. You didn't know, and you still decided. Tyler's mouth shut. Madison swallowed hard. Her cheeks were pale now, but her chin stayed lifted. Pride can survive longer than honesty. Sometimes it stands there after every excuse has died. Mr. Brooks, she began, forcing a professional tone back into her voice. I sincerely apologize for the misunderstanding. Ethan did not react to the word misunderstanding. It was the kind of word companies used when the truth had teeth. A misunderstanding is when two people hear the wrong gate number. A misunderstanding is when a bag goes to Denver instead of Dallas. This was not that. Ethan looked at her hands. They were clasped tightly in front of her uniform. Her knuckles had gone white. "Do not reduce this to a misunderstanding," he said. The sentence was quiet, but the cabin felt it. Madison's eyes flickered toward Mark Ellison, then toward Rebecca Hayes, then to the phones still recording. She was not thinking about Ethan's dignity yet. She was thinking about damage, her job, her reputation, the headline, the clip that would travel faster than any apology she could write. That was what made Ethan's chest tighten, not because she was afraid, but because fear had arrived before remorse. Mark stepped into the aisle. "Madison, Tyler, I need both of you to step off the aircraft with me." Madison's face snapped toward him. "Now?" "Yes." "We're in the middle of boarding. We have a relief crew on the way," Mark said. "Operations has already assigned them." Tyler stared at the floor. Madison shook her head slightly. "Mark, I have worked this route for 12 years. And right now," Mark said, lowering his voice, "you are being removed from duty pending review." Removed from duty. The phrase struck her harder than Ethan's title had. Passengers shifted in their seats, not cheering, not celebrating, just absorbing the weight of consequences unfolding in real time. Charles Whitman cleared his throat. "I hope this doesn't delay the flight much longer." Ever eyed earned to him. It was a small sentence. Selfish, careless, exactly the wrong thing to say. Margaret, the silver-haired woman in row 3, stared at him as if he had dropped trash on a church floor. "A man was humiliated in front of all of us," she said. "And you're worried about your arrival time?" Charles stiffened. "I'm worried about a professional situation being handled professionally." Ethan looked at him. "No," he said. "You're worried that the wrong person was finally believed." Charles opened his mouth, then closed it. Eleanor lowered her eyes. For the first time, shame touched her face, real shame. Not embarrassment, not inconvenience, something heavier, something older. She took a half step away from her husband. "Charles," she whispered, "stop." He looked at her, stunned. She did not look back. Madison reached for her crew bag near the galley. Her fingers trembled as she lifted it. Tyler followed, moving like a man walking through water. As Madison passed Ethan's row, she stopped. The cabin held its breath. "I'm sorry," she said. This time the words were smaller, less polished, less useful. Ethan studied her face. He could see fear there, humiliation, a trace of anger, and beneath it maybe the first painful edge of recognition. But he had learned long ago not to confuse a forced apology with transformation. "I hope you are," he said. "Not because I'm your boss, because I was your passenger." Madison's eyes filled, but no tear fell. That sentence landed deeper than punishment, because it removed every shield she had built. Not owner, not chief executive, not powerful man. Passenger, human being. That was who she had failed to see. Rebecca Hayes stepped aside to let Madison and Tyler pass. She watched them walk down the jet bridge, her face unreadable. Then she turned back to Ethan. "Mister," she said quietly, "for what it's worth, you handled yourself with remarkable restraint." Ethan gave a faint nod. "I wish restraint were not required so often." Rebecca looked down for a moment. She understood that sentence. Many people did, especially those who had spent their lives measuring every gesture so no one could twist pain into aggression. Mark remained near Ethan's seat, still holding the cabin tablet like evidence. "Sir," he said, "Operations wants to know whether you'd prefer to deplane or continue on this flight. We can arrange another aircraft if needed." A few passengers looked at Ethan, waiting. Some expected him to leave. Some expected him to punish everyone. Some expected anger now that he had the room. But Ethan looked out the window. The morning light pressed against the glass. Beyond the jet bridge, ground crews moved in bright vests. Bags rolled on conveyor belts. A plane pushed back in the distance, slow and steady, like nothing had happened anywhere in the world. He thought of his father's leather briefcase under the seat. He thought of Grace on the phone, already building a case file. He thought of every complaint Avery Air had received and softened with phrases like customer perception, isolated behavior, and service inconsistency. He had used those words too once, maybe not out of cruelty. but out of distance. Distance makes injustice sound manageable. Close up, it has a face, it has a voice. It says you don't belong. Ethan turned back to Mark. I will stay on the flight. Mark blinked.
You're sure?
Yes, I paid for this seat. I will take this flight in this seat. The cabin seemed to exhale. Ethan looked toward Charles and Eleanor, and Mr. Whitman will sit in his assigned seat. Charles's jaw tightened, but he said nothing. Eleanor gently touched his arm and guided him toward 2C and 2D. This time he followed. No speech, no demand, no performance, just compliance. The replacement crew arrived several minutes later. 2 attendants stepped in, visibly tense but composed. The lead attendant, a black woman in her late 40s named Denise Walker, approached Ethan first. Mr. Brooks, she said, meeting his eyes with steady respect. My name is Denise. I'll be serving this cabin today. I'm sorry for what happened here. Ethan heard the difference. She did not say if. She did not say misunderstanding. She said what happened. That mattered. Thank you, Denise, he said. She nodded once. Then she turned to the cabin. Ladies and gentlemen, thank you for your patience. We are going to complete boarding and prepare for departure. We ask that everyone treat one another and this crew with respect. Her voice was calm, firm, human. The cabin obeyed. Phones lowered slowly. Seatbelts clicked. Overhead bins shut with soft thumps. But the story had already escaped the aircraft. Outside that cabin, videos were uploading. Messages were spreading. A company's private failure was becoming public truth. Ethan's phone buzzed again. Grace. Media already calling. Board wants emergency meeting after landing. Ethan typed back with one thumb. Good. Include training records, complaint history, and crew escalation policies. Then he paused. He added one more line. This is not about firing people. It is about changing what we tolerate. He sent it. The plane door closed. The engines began their low-rising hum. Ethan sat back in seat 2A, the same seat he had been told he did not deserve. His breathing slowed, but his eyes stayed open. He knew the hardest part was not over. Consequences were easy to announce. Culture was harder to change. And somewhere behind him, in a cabin full of people who had watched power shift in real time, a quiet lesson settled into the air. Respect should never depend on who someone turns out to be. It should begin the moment they arrive. The wheels left the runway with a hard, breathless lift. For a moment, the entire aircraft seemed to hold itself between two worlds. Below, Chicago fell away in squares of concrete, glass, traffic, and morning light. Above, the sky opened pale and cold, endless in a way that made human pride seem small. Inside first class, no one spoke louder than a whisper. That silence had changed. Before, it had been the silence of people avoiding discomfort. Now it was the silence of people sitting with what they had allowed themselves to witness. Ethan Brooks kept his seatbelt fastened, and his hands relaxed on the armrests. The worn leather briefcase sat beneath the seat in front of him, exactly where it had been when Madison first decided it looked out of place. The briefcase had belonged to his father, Samuel Brooks, a man who carried mail through Detroit winters with cracked hands and swollen knees, but still pressed his uniform every night as if dignity were something you owed yourself before anyone else could take it away. Ethan touched the edge of the leather with the side of his shoe, a small gesture, private, grounding. Denise Walker moved through the cabin with measured care. She did not overcorrect. She did not smother Ethan with attention to prove a point. That would have been its own kind of performance. Instead, she treated him with the same respect she gave everyone else. Water poured into a glass, a folded napkin placed neatly beside it. A quiet, "Let me know if you need anything, Mr. Brooks."
Simple.
Professional. Human. That simplicity almost hurt, because it showed how easy it should have been from the start. Across the aisle, Charles Whitman sat stiffly in seat 2C, staring straight ahead. He had not touched the sparkling water Denise had offered him. Eleanor sat beside him, her hands folded in her lap. Every few minutes, she glanced toward Ethan as if she wanted to say something, but did not trust her own voice. Behind Ethan, Margaret's husband finally leaned toward her. "You always do that," he whispered. Margaret turned slightly. "Do what? Put yourself in the middle." She looked down at her hands. They were still shaking. "No," she said softly. "I spent most of my life not putting myself in the middle." Her husband looked at her. Margaret kept her voice low, but the words came from somewhere deep. When I was teaching in St. Louis, there was a boy in my class. Brightest child I ever met. His name was Terrence. Other teachers called him difficult because he asked questions. I watched them push him out, little by little. I told myself I was being careful. I told myself I had a mortgage. I told myself someone else would speak up. She swallowed. No one did. Her husband's face softened. Margaret looked toward Ethan. I won't make that mistake twice. Ethan heard the last line. He did not turn around, but his eyes closed for a moment. Healing does not always arrive as an apology from the person who hurt you. Sometimes it arrives as one stranger refusing to repeat the cowardice of the past. Near the galley, Denise spoke quietly with the replacement attendant, a young man named Aaron. His hands were careful as he checked meal counts on a tablet. "Stay steady," Denise told him. "I am," Aaron said, though his voice suggested otherwise. "No," she replied gently. "You're trying to look steady. There's a difference." He glanced toward Ethan. "I've never served the owner of the airline before." Denise looked at him. "You serve people every day. That should be enough pressure." Aaron went still. The lesson landed. Denise did not smile. She simply handed him a stack of linen napkins. "Start with row 3. Ask. Listen. Don't assume." He nodded. In seat 2A, Ethan's phone lit up again. Grace. He read the message without changing expression. Video spreading fast. Local news picked it up. National producers asking for comment. Board members joining emergency call before landing. Below that came another line. Madison requesting to speak to you through employee relations. Ethan stared at the screen. The engines hummed around him, steady, powerful, indifferent. He could picture Madison in some airport office now, uniform jacket still on, mascara perhaps smudged, hands wrapped around a paper cup of water she had not touched. He did not pity her exactly. But he knew that consequences had a way of turning people into children again, scared and small, suddenly desperate for the mercy they had denied others. He typed slowly. "Not during flight. She can submit a statement. Ensure she has representation and access to the Employee Assistance Program." Then he added, "Accountability without cruelty." He sent it. Rebecca Hayes had remained on board for departure at operations request, seated in the last row of first class until the aircraft reached cruising altitude. She watched Ethan from a distance. She had seen anger before, real anger, drunk anger, entitled anger, violent anger. Ethan's restraint was different. It was not weakness, it was discipline built over a lifetime. When the seatbelt sign turned off, Rebecca walked forward. "Mr. Brooks," she said quietly. Ethan looked up. "Yes, Officer Hayes? I'll be returning to my jump seat area for the rest of the flight. Operations asked me to remain available as a witness." "Thank you." She hesitated. There was something else. Ethan waited. Rebecca lowered her voice. "My brother is a pilot," she said, "regional carrier out of Atlanta. He's been mistaken for baggage crew while wearing his captain's uniform." Ethan's face softened just slightly. Rebecca looked away, embarrassed by her own honesty. "He laughs it off," she continued, "says people see what they've been trained to see, but I know it gets to him." Ethan nodded. "It does." Rebecca looked back at him. "I should have asked you first, before I asked them." That admission cost her something. Ethan could see it, and because he could see it, he respected it. "You came into a framed situation," he said, "but next time, break the frame." Rebecca took that in. "Break the frame." She nodded once. "I will." As she walked away, Ethan looked around the cabin. The crisis had not ended. It had changed shape. The videos were out there now, faces captured, words preserved. People would choose sides before knowing the whole story. Some would defend Madison. Some would attack Ethan. Some would make it political. Some would reduce a human wound to an argument on a screen. That was the cruelty of public life. But the private truth remained. A man had been told he did not belong. He had stayed, not just for himself. The meal service began, quiet and careful. Denise approached Charles and Eleanor first. Charles barely looked at her. "Water," he said. Denise paused. "Still or sparkling, sir?" "Whatever." Eleanor looked at Denise and said softly, "Sparkling for him." "Still for me, please." Denise nodded. Eleanor's fingers tightened around her napkin. Then she turned across the aisle. "Mr. Brooks." Charles stiffened. Ethan looked over. Eleanor's face was pale, but her eyes were clear now. "I owe you an apology," she said. Charles muttered, "Ellie, don't." She ignored him. I stood there and let my discomfort matter more than what was right. I didn't say the things Madison said, but I benefited from them. And I'm sorry. The cabin quieted again. Ethan studied her. This apology was not polished. It did not ask for forgiveness. It did not explain. That made it stronger. Thank you, Ethan said. Charles stared at her as if she had betrayed him. Eleanor turned to him.
And you should apologize, too.
His face darkened.
For what?
I didn't know who he was. Eleanor's voice became sharper. That is exactly the point. The words struck him. For the first time, Charles had no answer. He looked at Ethan. His pride wrestled with the room, with the cameras, with his wife's disappointment, with a truth he did not want to hold. Finally, he looked down. I handled it poorly, he said. Ethan not let him escape into softness. You participated in it. Charles's jaw moved. Then after a long moment, he nodded. Yes, he said. I did. It was not healing. Not yet. But it was a crack in the wall. And sometimes a crack is where the light first enters. Ethan's phone buzzed again. This time, the caller ID showed Martin Hale. Ethan answered. Go ahead. Martin's voice was tight. Sir, the board is asking whether you want to issue a short holding statement before landing. Ethan looked out the window. Clouds rolled beneath them, white and endless, hiding the country below. Yes, he said. Keep it simple. He paused, then gave the words slowly. Avery Air is aware of a serious incident involving the treatment of a confirmed passenger on Flight 417. We are reviewing all records, preserving all evidence, and cooperating with witnesses. No customer should have to prove their dignity before receiving basic respect. Martin was silent for a beat. Then he said, understood. Ethan ended the call. In the row behind him, Margaret wiped her eyes. Denise stood in the galley, listening, her face still but shining with quiet approval. And somewhere far below, millions of people who had never met Ethan Brooks were about to hear a sentence they had needed someone powerful to say out loud. No customer should have to prove their dignity before receiving basic respect. By the time Flight 417 crossed over the flat, golden fields of Kansas, the story had already outrun the aircraft. It moved faster than the engines, faster than the clouds, faster than Ethan Brooks could control. A short video from Row 3 had passed through family group chats first. Then it found social media. Then a local reporter in Chicago shared it with one sentence. Avery Air passenger told he does not belong in first class. Passenger later identified as company owner. After that, there was no slowing it down. In the cabin, passengers did not know the full storm building below them. They only felt pieces of it. Phones lighting up, silent glances, a nervous shift each time someone received a notification. The young man in row 4 who had recorded Madison holding Ethan's boarding pass like it was evidence of a crime, stared at his screen with wide eyes.
Whoa,
he whispered. His seatmate leaned closer.
What? It's everywhere.
Ethan heard him, but he did not turn around. He already knew. His own phone sat on the armrest, lighting up every few seconds. Grace, Martin, legal, board chair, media director, human resources, outside counsel. One screen, too many fires. Denise Walker noticed the phone lighting up. She approached with a fresh glass of water and set it down gently. Mr. Brooks, she said, would you like some privacy? Ethan looked up. Her voice carried no curiosity, no hunger for details. Just concern, I would, he said, but I don't think privacy is available today. Denise nodded once. I understand. She started to step away, then stopped. My mother used to say, once truth leaves the room, you can only hope it was raised right. Ethan looked at her. For the first time that day, the corner of his mouth almost moved. That sounds like a good mother. She was, Denise said. Still is. And she would tell you to drink that water before you start saving the world. That small sentence broke something open in the tightness around Ethan's chest. Not enough to make him laugh, enough to remind him he was still a person. He picked up the glass. Thank you. Denise returned to the galley. Across the aisle, Eleanor Whitman watched that exchange quietly. It seemed to trouble her, not because Denise had been kind, but because kindness had looked so ordinary, so easy. It made the earlier cruelty look even more naked. Charles sat with his arms crossed, pretending to sleep. But he was not asleep. His phone was face down on his lap. A message from a colleague had appeared moments earlier. Is that you in the Avery Air video? He had not opened it. He did not need to. He had seen enough of himself already. In the back of first class, Rebecca Hayes was finishing her witness notes. Her pen moved across a small report pad with careful pressure. She wrote the facts first. Passenger seated in assigned seat. Boarding pass confirmed. Crew member alleged fraud without evidence. Gate manager confirmed assignment. Employee attempted manual reassignment flag. Then she paused. Facts were clean. Motives were not. She looked toward Ethan and thought of her brother again. Captain Marcus Hayes. Clean uniform, gold bars. Still mistaken for the driver outside hotels. She added one more sentence. Passenger remained calm throughout incident. It mattered. It should not have mattered. But it would, because people would try to rewrite him as angry. They always tried that. Ethan's phone rang. Grace again. This time, he answered. Talk to me. Grace's voice was steady, but he could hear the speed beneath it. The holding statement is live. It's getting strong response, mostly supportive, some backlash. Cable News has requested comment. The board wants to know whether you'll appear on camera after landing. No. Grace paused. No? Not immediately. Understood. May I ask why? Ethan looked out at the wing slicing through white sunlight. Because if I speak too soon, this becomes about me. I don't want that. Grace softened.
Then what do you want?
He did not answer right away. He watched the clouds shift beneath them like a quiet country no one could step on. I want every complaint from the past 2 years pulled by category. Seat disputes, passenger removals, ID verification, service denial, crew escalation, anything with race, appearance, language, disability, or family status mentioned. Grace was already typing. Done. I want an outside civil rights firm hired before close of business. Already drafting a short list. I want Madison and Tyler treated fairly, but removed from customer-facing duty pending the investigation.
Yes.
And I want no one in public relations using the phrase isolated incident. Grace stopped typing. That one mattered. Agreed, she said. Ethan's voice dropped. Nothing is isolated when the same people keep getting hurt in the same way. Grace was silent for a breath. Then she said, I'll make sure they hear that. He ended the call. The cabin had become a strange courtroom. No judge, no gavel, just people sitting with evidence in their memories. Aaron, the young replacement attendant, approached Margaret's row with coffee. Cream or sugar, Mom? Margaret looked up. Just cream, thank you. His hand shook slightly as he poured. A small ripple splashed onto the saucer. I'm sorry, he said quickly. Margaret smiled with tired kindness. It's all right, dear. Big morning. Aaron exhaled. Yes, Mom. She studied him. You're new? 6 months. And you're scared. Aaron froze. Margaret's smile faded into something gentler. That's not criticism. It means you still care whether you get things right. Aaron swallowed. I keep thinking about what I would have done if I had been working up front when it happened. Margaret stirred her coffee. That's a good thing to wonder. What if I froze? Then learn from the people who didn't. Her eyes moved toward Ethan. Aaron followed her gaze. Ethan sat still but not distant. His calm had become the center of the cabin. Not cold, not arrogant, just anchored. Aaron nodded. I will. A few rows ahead, Eleanor leaned toward Charles. You should say something real to him. Charles kept his eyes closed. I already apologized. No, Eleanor said. You protected yourself with words. His eyes opened. That's not fair. Neither was what happened to him. He turned toward her, anger rising, then saw her face. She was not attacking him. She was grieving him a little. That hurt worse. Charles looked down at his hands. Soft hands. Expensive watch. A life where inconvenience had often been mistaken for injustice, he whispered. I didn't think of myself as that kind of man. Eleanor's voice was quiet. Most people don't. The sentence stayed between them. No comfort, no escape. Near the front, Ethan's phone lit again. Martin Hale. Emergency board call convened. They are asking for your opening direction. Ethan typed back. Tell them this. We do not protect the brand by minimizing harm. We protect the brand by becoming worthy of trust. He sent it. Then he leaned back and closed his eyes. But rest would not come. He saw Madison's face again. Her certainty, her hand holding the pass, her decision to see him as a threat instead of a customer. He wondered how many times she had done something smaller than this. A colder greeting, a slower response, a suspicious glance, a joke in the galley. Nothing large enough to make a headline. Everything large enough to bruise a person's spirit. That was how bias survived. Not always in explosions, often in habits, in tone, in who gets believed feet first, and who gets asked for proof twice. The captain's voice came over the intercom. Ladies and gentlemen, we've reached our cruising altitude. We expect a smooth flight into Los Angeles. Thank you again for your patience during boarding. The words were ordinary, but the day was not. Ethan opened his eyes. From across the aisle, Charles Whitman was looking at him, not with entitlement now, with discomfort, with fear, with something like shame. Mr. Brooks, Charles said, his voice rough. Ethan turned. Charles took a breath. I need to say this properly. Eleanor watched him, still and silent. Charles looked down once, then forced himself to meet Ethan's eyes. I judged you before you spoke. I accepted special treatment because it benefited me. And when the truth came out, I cared more about delay than dignity. That was wrong. The cabin listened. Charles's face reddened, but he kept going. I'm sorry. Ethan studied him for a long moment. Apologies did not erase harm, but honest ones could mark the place where a man stopped lying to himself. Thank you, Ethan said. Charles nodded once and looked away, smaller but more human than before. Outside, the aircraft cut west through the clear American sky. Inside, the first real repair had begun. Not in a press release, not in a boardroom, but in a cabin where people who had witnessed humiliation were finally learning that respect is not proven by status. It is proven by how you treat someone before you know who they are. The descent began before anyone was ready for what waited on the ground. A soft chime sounded above the cabin. Seatbacks rose. Laptops closed. Window shades lifted. The ordinary rituals of landing returned, but nothing felt ordinary now. Every click of a seatbelt sounded too sharp. Every glance carried weight. Los Angeles appeared beneath the clouds, wide and bright, stretched out in highways and rooftops and silver morning haze. The city looked calm from above. It always did. From that height, no one could see the arguments, the headlines, the private wounds people carried from place to place. Ethan Brooks looked down through the oval window. He had flown into Los Angeles hundreds of times. For board meetings, investor calls, labor negotiations, charity events, emergency briefings after storms. He knew the airport by sound alone, the roar of engines, the echo of rolling bags, the impatient rhythm of American travel. But this landing felt different. He was not arriving as a chief executive. He was arriving as evidence. His phone lit again. Grace. Press at arrival gate. Airport police notified. Board members waiting in conference room at LAX Operations Center. Madison and Tyler statements received. Reviewing now. Ethan read the message twice. Then he typed. No press scrum at the gate. Passengers leave first. Witnesses not pressured. Protect their privacy. He paused, then added, and make sure Margaret has our contact information if she wants it. He sent it. Behind him, Margaret adjusted the strap of her purse with slow, nervous fingers. Her husband, Arthur, watched her the way people watch someone they have known for 50 years and are still learning from. You all right? He asked. Margaret looked toward the window. No, she said, but I think that's appropriate. Arthur gave a small nod. I'm proud of you. She turned to him. That nearly broke her. Not because he had never said it before, but because this time she had needed to hear it from the part of him that usually preferred silence. Across the aisle, Charles Whitman sat motionless. His earlier apology had not freed him. It had only opened the door to a room he did not want to enter. Eleanor watched the city below and wondered how many times she had mistaken politeness for goodness. She had said nothing cruel. She had used no insult. She had not raised her voice. But silence had still made room for harm. That realization sat in her chest like a stone. Denise Walker moved down the aisle for final cabin check. Mr. Whitman, tray table, please. Charles blinked, then folded it up. Yes, sorry. The word came out too quickly. Denise did not react. She moved on. Mr. Brooks, are you secure? Ethan looked up. Yes, thank you. Denise hesitated for half a beat. There will be people waiting. I know. Do you want us to hold the cabin after landing? No, Ethan said. No one else should lose more time because of what happened to me. Denise studied him for a moment. Then she nodded. There was respect in that nod, not the polished respect given to titles. Something older, person to person. The plane dipped lower. The landing gear groaned beneath them. A child somewhere in economy squealed with excitement. Someone laughed softly. The sound felt strangely tender, a reminder that life continued beside pain, not after it. The runway rushed up. Rubber met pavement. The aircraft struck the ground with a hard sigh. A reverse thrust roared through the cabin. Bodies leaned forward. Phones trembled in hands. Los Angeles pressed around them, hot and bright and waiting. As the aircraft taxied, Ethan's phone rang. Martin Hale. Ethan answered, keeping his voice low. We're on the ground. I know, Martin said. We have an issue. Ethan's eyes narrowed. What issue? Someone from passenger relations drafted a statement calling the event a misunderstanding involving a seat reassignment dispute. It has not gone out. Grace caught it. Ethan closed his eyes. For 1 second, anger flashed through him. Hot, clean, exhausting. Then he opened his eyes. Who approved that language? No final approval. Draft only. Find out who wrote it, Ethan said. Not to punish them first. To understand why the instinct was to shrink the truth. Martin was quiet. Ethan continued. That instinct is the disease, Martin. The incident is the symptom. Yes, sir. And remove the word misunderstanding from every document unless the facts support it. Understood. The plane turned toward the gate. Through the window, Ethan could see 2 black SUVs parked near the service road, airport operations vehicles. A cluster of people stood beyond the glass inside the terminal, some in suits, some with cameras, some pretending not to be cameras. Grace would be there. So would the board chair. So would people who had ignored earlier complaints because no video had forced them to care. The thought hardened him. The seatbelt sign remained on, but phones already began to buzz across the cabin. People were seeing themselves online now, not just the incident, their reactions, their faces, their silence. The young man in row 4 whispered, "My mom just texted me. She said she saw the video." His seatmate said, "What did she say?" He stared at his screen. She said, "I hope you spoke up." The words hit him visibly. He had recorded. He had not spoken. For the first time, that difference mattered to him. The aircraft stopped. The seatbelt sign turned off with a chime. No one stood immediately. That was unusual. On most flights, people jumped up like the seat had burned them. Overhead bins opened. Aisles clogged. Patience vanished. But here, there was a pause, a full, heavy pause. Then Ethan unbuckled his seatbelt. The click sounded final. He stood slowly and reached for the overhead bin. Before he could lift his bag down, Aaron stepped forward. "I can get that for you, sir." Ethan looked at him. Aaron seemed nervous, but not performative. He was trying to do the job right. "Thank you," Ethan said. Aaron pulled down the carry-on with both hands and set it carefully beside him. Charles stood across the aisle, holding his own bag. He looked at Ethan, then away, then back again. "Mr. Brooks," Ethan waited. Charles swallowed. "I know you don't owe me anything, but I want you to know I'm going to call Avery Air and provide a statement. A truthful one." Eleanor looked at him with quiet relief. Ethan nodded. That would be useful. Charles nodded back. It was not friendship. It was not redemption. It was a man taking one step toward responsibility. Sometimes that is all the day can hold. Margaret stood behind Ethan. "Mr. Brooks," she said. He turned. She held her purse strap with both hands. "I'm sorry I did not speak sooner." Ethan's face softened. "You spoke when it counted." She shook her head. "I spoke when I could not bear myself otherwise." That honesty touched him more than comfort would have. Ethan reached into his jacket and handed her a small business card. "If you're willing, my team may ask for your account. Only if you choose." Margaret took the card like it weighed something. "I'll tell the truth. I know," Ethan said. The cabin door opened. Warm California air pushed in, carrying the smell of jet fuel and terminal coffee. At the front of the aircraft, Mark Ellison stood waiting, pale but composed. Rebecca Hayes was beside him. Beyond them, through the open door, Grace Bennett stood in a charcoal suit, tablet in hand, eyes sharp with controlled fury. She saw Ethan. Her expression changed for only a second. Concern broke through the professional mask. Then she straightened. "Mr. Brooks," she said. Ethan stepped into the doorway. Behind him, passengers waited. In front of him, cameras waited. Above him, the Avery Air logo gleamed on the jet bridge wall, the same logo people trusted to carry them safely across the country. Ethan looked at it for a long second. Then he turned to Grace. "Before we meet the board," he said, "make sure every passenger on this flight receives a direct apology, not a voucher, not a script, a real apology." Grace nodded. "And Madison?" Ethan's eyes moved toward the terminal. "She gets due process, and so does the truth." Grace's fingers tightened around the tablet. The jet bridge seemed narrower now, lined with staff who suddenly did not know where to look. Ethan began walking, not fast, not slow, steady. Behind him, the passengers started to follow, one by one, carrying their bags, their recordings, their memories, and the uncomfortable knowledge that the real test had never been who Ethan Brooks was. The real test had been who they were before they knew. The jet bridge felt longer than it should have. Ethan walked through it with Grace Bennett at his side, the sound of his shoes soft against the rubber floor. Behind the glass, Los Angeles International Airport moved in its usual restless rhythm. Travelers hurried past with coffees, rolling bags, children, boarding passes, and the kind of tired faces people wear when they have been awake since before sunrise. But near the end of the jet bridge, the world narrowed. Two Avery Air executives stood waiting near the operations door. Behind them, a communications director clutched a phone with both hands. Farther back, airport police kept a loose barrier between the arriving passengers and a small group of reporters who had clearly moved faster than anyone wanted. Camera lenses rose. Questions began before Ethan even reached the carpet. "Mr. Brooks, do you have a comment? Were you racially profiled on your own airline? Will the employees be fired? Is Avery Air facing legal action?" Grace stepped half a pace forward, her face calm and unreadable. "Mr. Brooks will not be taking questions at the gate," she said. "A statement will be issued after the internal review begins." The reporters kept talking. Of course they did. Cameras do not respect healing. They feed on open wounds. Ethan did not stop. He looked straight ahead, not because he was afraid of the questions, but because he knew how quickly pain could become performance if he let the cameras decide the shape of it. Still, as he passed, he saw passengers from the flight watching him. Margaret and Arthur stood off to the side. Margaret held his business card in one hand and her purse strap in the other. When Ethan glanced her way, she gave a small nod. Not dramatic, not public, just steady. He returned it. Charles and Eleanor Whitman walked a few steps behind them. Charles kept his head low. Eleanor looked directly at Ethan once, then toward the reporters, and something in her posture shifted. She was not hiding. That mattered. At the operations door, a tall woman in a Navy suit extended her hand. "Mr. Brooks," she said, "I'm Angela Pierce, Airport Operations Director." Ethan shook her hand. Angela. Her eyes were red around the edges, not from crying, but from stress. She had likely spent the last hour inside a room full of people asking how bad this was going to get. "It's been a difficult morning," she said. Ethan looked at her. "For whom?" The question stopped her. Angela's lips parted, then closed. Grace looked down at her tablet, but Ethan knew she had heard it. Everyone had. Angela took a breath. "For you," she said carefully, "and for the passengers who witnessed it." Ethan held her gaze 1 second longer. "Good correction." Angela nodded. It was not a small thing. In corporate language, harm often becomes weather, a difficult morning, an unfortunate situation, a customer concern. Words that float above responsibility. Ethan was done floating. They entered the operations corridor. The airport noise faded behind a heavy door. The hallway smelled of coffee, printer toner, and old carpet. Fluorescent lights hummed overhead. On the walls were framed photographs of Avery Air aircraft at sunset, smiling crews, ribbon cuttings, charity events, all the images companies use to remind themselves who they want to be. Ethan walked past them without slowing. Inside Conference Room B, the emergency board call was already live on a large screen. Faces filled the monitor, some tense, some embarrassed, some carefully blank. At the table sat Martin Hale, Chief Operations Officer, his tie loosened. Beside him was Patrice Lang, General Counsel, with a legal pad open and 3 pens lined up beside it. The head of communications, Owen Marsh, stood near the far wall, pale and sweating through his collar. Ethan entered. Everyone stood. He did not tell them to sit right away. He placed his father's leather briefcase on the table. The soft thud echoed through the room. Then he looked at the screen. At what point, he asked, did we become more afraid of bad publicity than bad behavior? No one answered. Good. He wanted the silence to do its work. Finally, he sat. The others followed. Martin cleared his throat. Ethan, first, I want to say on behalf of operations, do not begin on behalf of anyone, Ethan said. Begin with what happened. Martin stopped. His face tightened with shame. Confirmed passenger in first class was challenged without basis. His documents were treated as suspicious after verification. A preferred customer was given more credibility than the ticketed passenger. Crew threatened removal. A manual reassignment flag was attempted after the dispute began. Ethan nodded once. Keep going. Martin glanced at Patrice. She picked up the next part. There is video evidence from multiple angles. Officer Hayes has agreed to provide a statement. Gate manager Mark Ellison preserved the cabin tablet. Passenger witnesses are being identified, but we are not contacting them aggressively.
Good.
Owen stepped forward. We have a revised public statement ready. Ethan turned to him. Read it. Owen swallowed and read from his phone. Avery Air is deeply concerned by the incident aboard Flight 417. We are conducting a thorough review and remain committed to providing a welcoming environment for all customers. Ethan stared at him. The room cooled. Owen's fingers tightened around the phone. It's standard holding language, he said weakly. That is the problem. Owen looked down. Ethan leaned forward. Welcoming environment is what companies say when they want credit for intentions. I want facts. I want responsibility. I want plain English. Patrice nodded. He's right. Owen looked wounded. I'm trying to protect the company. Ethan's voice sharpened. Then protect its conscience. The words hit the room with force. On the screen, one board member looked away. Another removed his glasses and rubbed his eyes. Ethan continued. A customer did not receive basic respect until people learned he had power. That is the story. Not because it happened to me. Because it happens to people who do not have my title every day, and they are expected to swallow it quietly. Grace stood near the door, tablet against her chest. She had worked with Ethan through mergers, lawsuits, labor strikes, and investor revolts. She had seen him angry. This was different. This was grief sharpened into leadership. Angela Pierce sat at the end of the table, hands folded tightly. I need to say something, she said. Ethan looked at her. Go ahead. Angela's voice was low. We have had complaints from this route before. Martin closed his eyes. Ethan did not move. What kind? Angela looked at the table. Seat challenges, tone complaints, passengers saying they were asked for extra verification. Most were marked as resolved with service credits. How many? Angela hesitated. Over the past 18 months, 12 on this route, more across the network. The room went silent. There it was, not a surprise. A record, a pattern with paperwork. Ethan's jaw tightened.
And who saw those reports?
No one wanted to answer. Martin finally said, operations, customer experience, regional leadership, and me? Grace's face changed. She looked down at her tablet, checking, though she already knew. Summarized trends were included in quarterly service reports, Martin said, not individual complaints. Ethan looked at him. In what language? Martin did not answer fast enough. Ethan knew. He opened his hand. Read it. Grace tapped quickly, then read from her screen. Premium cabin friction related to expectation mismatch and inconsistent passenger communication. Ethan let out one quiet breath. Expectation mismatch. There it was again. The fog machine of corporate language. He stood. Everyone else froze. No more, he said. The sentence was not loud. It did not need to be. No more hiding people's pain inside language designed to protect our comfort. No more calling bias a communication issue. No more service credits in place of accountability. No more rewarding loyalty members when their preference becomes another passenger's humiliation. Owen lowered his eyes. Angela blinked back tears. Martin looked like he had aged 10 years in 10 minutes. Ethan turned to Patrice. Hire the outside firm today. Full access. Complaint history, training records, crew communications, passenger removals. I want findings made public where legally possible. Patrice nodded. Understood. He turned to Martin. Effective immediately, any attempt to remove a passenger from a confirmed premium seat requires documented cause, supervisor review, and recorded verification. Preference is not cause. Discomfort is not cause. Appearance is not cause. Martin wrote fast. Ethan faced Owen. Draft the statement again. Owen nodded. What should it say? Ethan looked toward the windowless wall. For a moment, he saw seat 2A again. Madison's hand, Tyler's smirk, Charles's certainty, Margaret's trembling courage. Then he spoke. Avery Air failed a passenger today. The failure was not a misunderstanding. It was a breakdown of judgment, respect, and accountability. We are preserving evidence, beginning an independent review, and changing procedures immediately. We will not ask customers to accept dignity as compensation after denying it as service. No one moved. Grace's eyes shone, but she kept her face composed. Owen typed with both thumbs. Ethan sat back down. And one more thing, he said. Every person in the room looked at him. Madison Clark and Tyler Reed are not the whole problem. They are part of it. If we only sacrifice employees and protect the system that shaped their choices, we learn nothing. That was the hardest truth in the room, because firing people was simple. Changing culture was expensive, embarrassing, slow, necessary. Ethan looked at the screen full of board members. Decide now, he said. Are we managing a scandal or are we becoming a better company? The question sat before them like a door. And this time, no one in the room could pretend they had not seen it. The board did not answer Ethan right away. That was how he knew the question had reached the right place. In business, people answer easy questions fast. They answer safe questions with polished words. But when a question touches the truth, the room goes still. Eyes drop, chairs creak, someone reaches for water. Someone pretends to read notes they already understand. On the large screen, board chair Caroline Mercer removed her glasses. She was 71, sharp as a winter morning, and had spent 4 decades in transportation law before joining Avery Air. She had seen strikes, crashes, mergers, bankruptcies, and more executive cowardice than she cared to remember. She looked at Ethan through the camera. We become a better company, she said. No slogan, no smile. Just the answer. One by one, the other board members nodded, some with conviction, some with fear. But they nodded. Ethan sat back slowly. Then we start today. Grace stepped forward and placed her tablet on the table. The revised statement is ready for approval. Owen Marsh read it aloud, this time with a different voice. Less defensive, more human. Avery Air failed a passenger today. The failure was not a misunderstanding. It was a breakdown of judgment, respect, and accountability. We are preserving evidence, beginning an independent review, and changing procedures immediately. We will not ask customers to accept dignity as compensation after denying it as service. No one spoke. The words were not comfortable. That was why they worked. Caroline Mercer gave one firm nod. Release it. Owen sent the statement with trembling fingers. The room seemed to feel the click. Outside the conference room, the airport continued its ordinary work. Flights boarded, bags moved, announcements echoed. A mother searched for a missing stroller. A businessman argued into a phone. A janitor pushed a cart past the operations hallway, unseen by people in suits who were discussing respect. Ethan watched him through the glass panel in the door. The man wore a gray uniform and moved with quiet efficiency, wiping a coffee spill no one else had noticed. Ethan wondered how many times that man had been ignored by people who considered themselves polite. Respect, Ethan thought, was not proven in moments with cameras. It was proven in hallways, at counters, in tones, in who got eye contact. Angela Pierce followed his gaze. That's Luis, she said quietly. He's been here 16 years. Ethan looked at her. Does leadership know his name? Angela's face changed. I do. That wasn't my question. She lowered her eyes. No, probably not. Ethan nodded once. Then that changes too. Martin looked up from his notes. Employee recognition? Human recognition, Ethan said. Start there. Grace's phone buzzed, then buzzed again, then again. She checked the screen. The statement is live. Owen refreshed his laptop. It's being picked up. Patrice Lang, the general counsel, leaned over his shoulder. Response? Owen swallowed. Strong. People are saying they've never seen an airline admit harm this directly. Angela let out a small breath. Then Owen's face to we tightened. There's more. Eth turned. Show me. Owen connected his laptop to the screen. A social media feed appeared. Video after video. Ethan in seat 2A. Madison holding the boarding pass. Tyler smirking. Charles standing in the aisle. Margaret speaking up. Mark scanning the ticket. The green confirmation beep. Then came the comments. Some were cruel, predictable, ugly in the way anonymous people can be when they mistake distance for permission. But many were not. A retired nurse from Atlanta wrote that she had been questioned in first class while wearing scrubs. A Vietnam veteran from Texas wrote that his Latino son had been asked if he was in the right boarding group 3 separate times. A grandmother from Ohio wrote that she cried when Margaret spoke because she had spent too many years staying quiet. A black pilot posted a photograph of himself in uniform and wrote, Even with wings on my chest, some people still ask if I am lost. The room changed as the post moved across the screen. This was no longer public relations. This was testimony. Not one story, hundreds, then thousands. Small humiliations, finally gathering enough weight to be undeniable. Ethan stood and walked closer to the screen. His face did change, but Grace saw his hand close slightly at his side. He was angry. Not loud angry, deeper than that. The kind that does not burn out quickly, the kind that builds things. Read that one, he said. Owen looked at the highlighted post. It's from a woman named Marlene Davis. She says, "My husband was asked to show proof of payment for a first-class meal, even though everyone else was served automatically. He laughed it off because he did not want to ruin our anniversary. I have regretted not speaking up for 9 years." The room stayed silent. Ethan's eyes lowered. 9 years, he said. No one replied, because everyone understood. Some wounds do not bleed in public. They sit quietly at dinner tables, in marriages, in memories. They become the stories someone tells softly years later and still feels ashamed for surviving. Patrice closed her legal pad. "We need a passenger listening line," she said. "Not a complaint form, a real response team." Ethan looked at her. "Yes." Angela added, "And route reviews, not just individual crew reviews. If patterns exist, managers must be accountable too." Martin nodded. "We can start with premium cabin escalation data." "No," Ethan said. Martin looked up. "We start with all cabins. Bias does not care where someone is seated." That landed hard, because first class had made this visible. But dignity did not cost $3,000. Grace typed fast. "Independent review, passenger listening line, route level audits, manager accountability, cabin-wide policy review." Caroline spoke from the screen. "And training?" Ethan turned to her. "Training is not a video people click through while drinking coffee." Caroline's mouth tightened in agreement. Ethan continued. "I want scenario-based training, live facilitation, real consequences. Crew must learn how bias hides inside language like policy, safety, comfort, and discretion. And supervisors must learn when to challenge their own team." Rebecca Hayes, who had been invited into the room as a witness, stood near the back wall. She had remained quiet, but now she raised her hand slightly. Ethan turned. "Officer Hayes?" She looked uncomfortable, standing in a room full of executives, but she spoke anyway. "You should include airport security in that training." Everyone looked at her. She kept going. "We often walk into situations after someone else has shaped the story. We hear disruptive, we hear aggressive, we hear non-compliant. And by the time we arrive, the passenger is already treated like the threat." Her voice tightened. "I almost did that today." Ethan held her gaze, "But you corrected." "Later than I should have."
That matters too.
Rebecca nodded once. Patrice wrote it down. "Involve contracted security and airport partners," she said. Grace added it. The work was becoming real now. Not clean, not easy, real. A knock came at the conference room door. Angela opened it. A young employee stood outside, nervous, holding a folded paper. "Sorry," he said. "This was sent over from employee relations." Angela brought it to Ethan. He unfolded it. A written statement from Madison Clark. The room watched him read. Her handwriting was uneven. Ethan read silently at first. Then he stopped at one line and read it aloud. "I believed I was protecting the cabin environment, but I now understand that what I called environment was really my own assumption about who belonged there." No one moved. Ethan continued. "I am ashamed that I only recognized Mr. Brooks' dignity after I learned his position. I cannot undo the harm. I am willing to participate fully in the investigation and any corrective process required." Ethan lowered the paper. The room waited for his reaction. He did not give them the easy one. No satisfaction, no forgiveness for display, no public cruelty. "She is beginning in the right place," he said, "but shame is not repair." Patrice nodded. "What do you want done?" "Due process, full review. If termination is warranted, so be it. If there is another path, it must include direct accountability, retraining, and a record that follows future assignments." Martin wrote it down. Ethan looked at everyone. "We are not here to destroy people for being caught. We are here to stop harm from being normal." That sentence softened something in the room. Not the urgency.
The purpose.
Grace's phone buzzed again. She looked at it, then at Ethan. "Margaret is outside. She said she is willing to give a statement before she leaves the airport." Ethan's expression shifted. Bring her in only if she wants to come in. No pressure. A minute later, Margaret entered with Arthur beside her. She looked smaller in the conference room than she had in the aircraft, but her eyes were steady. Ethan stood. Mrs. Parker. She gave a tiny smile. Margaret, please, Margaret. She glanced around at the executives, then at the screen full of board members. My goodness, she said softly. This is quite a room. Arthur squeezed her hand. Ethan pulled out a chair. You do not have to do this. I know. She sat. Her hands shook again, but this time she placed them flat on the table. I saw a man treated like a suspect for sitting in the seat he paid for, she said. I saw him stay calm, while others tried to make him look unreasonable. I saw a crew member choose a wealthy white passenger's comfort over a black passenger's rights, and I saw the rest of us almost let it happen. Her voice broke on the last sentence.
Almost.
That word filled the room. Almost was where lives changed. Almost was where responsibility lived. Ethan looked at the board, then at his team, then at Margaret. Thank you, he said. That is the truth we needed. Margaret wiped her eyes. No, she said. It is the truth you already had. I'm just sorry it took passengers filming it for people to listen. No executive had an answer for that, because there was none. Only work, only change, only the long road between apology and trust. Ethan looked around the room one final time. Then let's earn the listening, he said. Starting now. Margaret's statement changed the room more than any viral video could. A video showed what happened. Margaret explained what it meant. When she finished, no one rushed to speak. The executives sat with their hands folded, their notes open, their faces stripped of performance. On the screen, the board members looked smaller than they had before, not less powerful, just more human, more aware that authority had not protected the right person until public evidence forced it to. Ethan remained standing at the head of the table. The conference room was windowless, but the outside world pressed against it from every side. Phones buzzed, news alerts flashed, staff whispered in the hallway. Somewhere nearby, a printer kept spitting out documents with a dry mechanical rhythm, as if the company itself were trying to catch up to the truth. Grace stepped close to Ethan and lowered her voice. Media is asking for your statement on camera. The press area is ready if you choose to use it. Ethan looked at the closed door. He could already imagine the lights, the microphones, the shouted questions, the framing. CEO humiliated on his own airline. Billionaire takes revenge. Flight crew fired after viral incident. That would be easy, too easy. The truth was harder. He turned back to the room. Before I speak publicly, I want the first actions confirmed. Martin Hale sat straighter. Madison Clark and Tyler Reed are removed from customer-facing duty pending investigation. Mark Ellison has secured the cabin tablet. All internal communications from the flight are preserved. No record deletion is permitted. Patrice Lang followed. Outside Civil Rights Counsel will be retained today. We are opening a protected passenger listening line, staffed by trained investigators, not standard customer service agents. We will review complaints from the past 2 years and expand if patterns require it. Angela Pierce added, her voice steadier now. Airport operations will begin supervisor retraining this week. Security partners will be included. Gate teams will receive new guidance on verified seat assignments and escalation language. Ethan looked at Owen. Owen swallowed. The public statement is live. I removed all minimizing language, no misunderstanding, no unfortunate confusion, no isolated incident. Ethan nodded once. Good. Then he looked at Margaret. She sat quietly beside Arthur, overwhelmed but present. Her courage had not made her taller or louder. It had made her tired. That was something people rarely understood about doing the right thing. It did not always feel noble. Sometimes it felt like shaking hands, dry throat, and a heart that would not slow down. Ethan walked to her. Thank you for staying. Margaret looked up. I should thank you.
For what?
For not turning cruel when you had the power to. That sentence moved through the room like a second testimony. Ethan looked down for a moment. His father's voice came back to him. Power is not what you can take from people. Power is what you refuse to become when people hurt you. He had not always lived up to that. No one does. But today, in this room, he wanted Avery Air to try. He turned to the board screen. Accountability begins with discipline, but repair begins with design. We will build a system where the next person does not need a title, a camera, or a stranger with courage in order to be believed. Caroline Mercer nodded slowly. Put that in the plan. Grace typed it word for word. A few minutes later, Ethan stepped into the press area. The lights were bright, too bright. They flattened faces and sharpened shadows. Reporters stood behind a rope line. Cameras pointed at him. Microphones crowded the podium like metal flowers. Grace stood to his right, Patrice to his left. Behind him stood Angela, Martin, Rebecca Hayes, and, by her own choice, Margaret Parker. That image mattered. A chief executive, a witness. An officer who had admitted the frame was wrong. A company being forced to look at itself. Ethan placed both hands on the sides of the podium. The room went quiet. He did not unfold a statement. He did not read from a card. He looked directly into the cameras. This morning, I boarded Avery Air Flight 417 as a passenger. I was seated in my confirmed first-class seat. Before departure, members of our crew challenged my right to be there, ignored valid documentation, and threatened my removal. That happened before they knew my role in this company. Camera shutters clicked. Ethan paused. His voice stayed controlled, but the weight inside it grew. What happened to me was wrong, but the greater failure would be pretending it only matters because it happened to me. A person should not need to be a chief executive to be treated with dignity. A customer should not need a camera to be believed. A human being should not need wealth, status, or recognition before receiving basic respect. Grace looked down briefly. Margaret wiped one eye. Ethan continued. Avery Air failed today. Not in our engines, not in our schedule, in our judgment, in our culture, in the habits we allowed to hide behind words like policy, comfort, safety, and premium service. The reporters stopped shifting. They listened. Effective immediately, we are beginning an independent review. We are preserving all evidence. We are changing seat escalation procedures. We are reviewing past complaints. We are creating a protected passenger listening process. And we are bringing security, gate teams, crew, supervisors, and executives into the same accountability structure. He leaned closer to the microphone. No one gets to outsource dignity. That line landed hard. It would travel. He knew it as soon as he said it, but he did not say it for the clip. He said it because it was true. We will not solve this with one firing. We will not solve it with one apology. We will solve it by changing what is normal inside this company. How we greet people, how we question people, how we believe people, how we correct ourselves when authority gets it wrong. A reporter raised her hand and called out, "Mr. Brooks, do you forgive the employees involved?" Grace's eyes sharpened, ready to intervene. Ethan lifted a hand slightly. It is not my job today to perform forgiveness for public comfort. It is my job to make sure harm is named, addressed, and not repeated. The room went still again. He let the silence hold. Then he said the final part slowly. I remained in seat 2A because I paid for it. But I am standing here now for every person who has ever been asked to prove they belong in a place they already earned. We see you. We hear you. And at Avery Air, we will have to earn the trust we should never have risked. He stepped back. No dramatic exit. No victory smile. Just a man carrying the weight of a hard morning and choosing to turn it into work. Later that evening, long after the cameras moved on, Ethan sat alone in his office overlooking the runway lights. Planes lifted into the dark one by one, carrying strangers towards cities, families, hospitals, funerals, vacations, business meetings, second chances. He opened the old leather briefcase and took out a photograph of his father. Samuel Brooks stood in his postal uniform, one hand on a mail truck, smiling like a man who had earned every inch of his dignity. Ethan placed the photograph on the desk. Then he looked out at the moving lights and whispered, "We start now." And that was the real ending. Not the viral clip, not the public statement, not the shock on Madison's face when she learned who he was. The real ending was a company forced to remember that every passenger carries a life larger than a seat number. Every uniform carries a duty larger than authority. Every witness carries a choice. And every moment of disrespect offers the same quiet test. Look closer, listen better. Treat people right before the world makes you. If this story reminded you that dignity should never depend on status, like this video so more people can hear its message. Subscribe for more powerful stories about justice, courage, and human respect. And in the comments, write these 3 words: never stay silent.